Your book Success Principles has done thousands and thousands of copies across the world. Before Success Principles, I want to talk about Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Sure.
You told me that story. How many times you got rejected, but you never gave up, and what happened? Can you share that story?
About trying to sell the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was really interesting. I just started collecting these stories, and I thought, this will make a good book. And so I'm writing all that up, and eventually I had breakfast with Mark Victor Hansen, my co-author, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm writing this book. He said, what's it about? And I said, it's all these inspirational stories that kind of speakers use a lot to get that standing ovation at the end, and just heartfelt. And he said, I want to write it with you. I said, Mark, I'm already over half done. Why would I do that? And he said, I'm a better marketer than you are. And then he said, I know at least 10 of the stories you stole from me, which wasn't true, maybe 5. But anyway, I said, okay, if you can go get 15 stories, what I don't have, we'll do it. And he did. And so now we have a book. We didn't have a title yet. Mark and I, and I'm going to get to your question in a minute, but I'm giving some background. So we didn't have a title. So Mark and I said, we're both meditators. So we're going to meditate and ask for a title and see what comes. And Mark's much more hyper than me. So he would go to bed every night going, best-selling title, mega best-selling title, mega best-selling title, mega, and like hoping that was like a story of subconscious. And I would just ask God, and I said, okay, I'm going to sit here for an hour. If you give me a title, I'd love it, And Wednesday, so third day, big green chalkboard emerges, not too different from the background of this, like in a school. And a hand comes out and writes chicken soup on the chalkboard. And I figured it was God's hand. And I said, well, what the heck does chicken soup have to do with this book? And the answer I got was, when you were a kid, your grandmother gave you chicken soup when you were sick. And I said, but this is not a book about sick people. And this was 1992, 3. There was a Gulf War going on. There was a big recession in America. And the voice said in my head, people's spirits are sick. They're in resignation, fear, and hopelessness. And I went, chicken soup for the spirit, chicken soup for the soul, goosebumps, And so I told my wife, she got goosebumps. I called Mark, he got goosebumps. We went to New York to sell it to publishers. 21 meetings, no one got goosebumps. So our agent gave us the book back. He said, I can't sell it. And so someone said, there's this conference called the American Booksellers Association. These are people who owned all the bookstores when there were many more bookstores. Now it's so much online with Amazon. But anyway, big convention center. And we walked around over and over and over saying all the publishers have booths to promote their new books to the booksellers, to the bookstores. And there was always editors there, and you could kind of sell your book to them while you were there. So we're going around with a backpack full of these manuscripts of like maybe half the stories. Not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested. And then we sent it out on our own to some people. We had 144 rejections.
Wow.
144. It was over almost a period of a year, 144. And I remember I collected...
I want to interrupt you. Why did you not give up?
Because I knew in my heart of hearts, every time I would tell those stories on stage, people would get goosebumps. They'd come up, they'd cry, they'd hug me. They'd say, I needed that story. Is that story available in a book anywhere? My daughter needs to read it. My staff needs to hear it, whatever. And so I knew that people wanted that book, but it didn't. The truth in the publishing industry at that time is short story collections didn't sell, but there were short stories that were fictional. These were nonfiction. These were real. And so they didn't compare apples to oranges, so they didn't know. And so anyway, I just knew I would have self-published if I had to. I didn't want to because I didn't really want to do that. I wanted to get more stories and write and do that. But finally, this little publisher down in Florida said, yes, we'll do it. Oh, no, that's not true. So what happened was a guy said to me, he said, next time you get a no, ask them what would have to happen for you to say yes. And I thought, that's a great question. And if you're watching this, which you are, I would tell you, that's a great question. When you get a no, ask them what would have to happen for you to say yes. So I said to this one publisher down in Florida, what would have to happen for you to say yes? He said, I'd need to know I could sell 20,000 copies. That would be break even for me and, little money for you. And otherwise we'd lose money, editing it and printing it and warehousing it and all that. So for about 3 months, Mark and I, every time we gave a talk, sometimes to 50 people, sometimes to 2,000 people, we put a sheet of paper on every chair. I can remember spending half hour doing it. And it said, I promise to buy X number of copies of Chicken Soup for the Soul when it comes out. And it had a picture of the mocked up cover we made, which didn't end up being the real cover, and then their address. This was before even like anyone was using email. So we didn't have email address, which is an address, and I think maybe a phone number. And so what happened was we went down to him, we took these banker's boxes full of these 20,000 yeses, plumped them on his desk and said, okay. And he said, all right. And he said, can I trust all this? I said, look, if you print 20,000 copies and they don't get sold, we'll buy them. You can't lose. And he went, okay. So that was, he said his goal was 20,000. He said, what's your goal to us? And I said, we want to sell 135,000 by Christmas, because this was in, the book came out like in July or something, and want to sell 1.5 million in a year and a half. He laughed at us. He said, you guys are crazy. I said, no, we're entrepreneurs. And we're visionaries. We sold 135,000 by Christmas. We sold 1.3 million in a year and a half. He bought a jet.
Wow. So you did the hard work, got 20,000 names, convinced him to publish the book, and he bought a jet.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I had collected all of the rejection letters, and I had them in a file. And when we hit the New York Times bestseller list, #1, I was going to just staple the bestseller list to the rejection letters and send them back to the people.
You should have.
I couldn't find the letters. I think God was protecting me from being an idiot.